We're grateful for first-time visitors and recurring visitors and occasional visitors. We'll be back here more often, so it's good to have Amanda with us too. That's going to bring our lesson a little bit later on. We are in the book of James, and before we're going to start in chapter 3 today. We finished up through chapter 2 last week, but the body of the book of James is there's an introduction at the beginning that we talked about and everything else, and then the main part of James is this is how we're breaking it out. So faith obeys the word. Faith is obedient. Okay, just if you have faith but don't do anything about it, it's worthless. It's worthless. Faith does not discriminate. Okay, that's the partiality, showing partiality, with the exception of, hey, when God says, be partial in this thing right here, make a distinction. We need to make a distinction. Faith proves itself through works. A little bit of a restatement of what he did in chapter 1, really, when it comes right down to it. I think I kind of finished up last week saying that if you look at the body of Paul's writings, because we're talking about the distinction between James and Paul, and where they had this disagreement about faith and works and how it all played together. If you look at Paul's writings, and if you look at Paul's experience, what you kind of see there is works without faith is dead. But when you look at James, faith without works is dead. Okay? Both of these things come together. So I hope that helps us understand, helps you understand where I think it all means. I hope we don't fall off the rails today as we go through, starting in chapter 3. Faith controls the tongue. Okay? So, again, James is very, very much in the New Testament about the very practical matters of acting like a Christian because of what our faith is. And so one of those things is our tongue, okay? And how our tongue interacts with it. Let's read chapter 3. Let's read verses. Let's just read 1 through 12. Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we shall incur a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. Now if we put the bits into horses' mouths so that they may obey us, we direct their entire body as well. Behold, the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder, wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. Behold, how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body, and sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell. For every species of beasts and birds and reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed, and has been tamed by the human race, but no one can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be this way. Does a fountain send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brethren, produce olives, or a vine produce figs? Neither can salt water produce fresh. So I think he does a great job here of really setting very efficiently the dangers of the tongue and the things that are there. In the first couple of verses, he goes, talking about teachers. If there's ever a verse that makes a teacher shudder, okay, it's this thing right here. Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we shall incur a stricter judgment, for we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. You can ask my wife, I'm not a perfect man, so I stumble. Okay? And I stumble in what I say, too. I pray that it wouldn't stumble up here. Every time Barry's up here, he started preaching almost every time he says. It's a great responsibility. Okay? It's right that he says that. And I know that he feels that way. I know that everybody stands up here and feels that way. And so if we make mistakes up here, please correct that so that we can talk about those things and make sure that we are not setting ourselves subject to that stricter judgment that he's talking about. So let's see. Okay. In verses 3 and 4, he's going to introduce the danger and the power of the tongue. He's going to use two examples to do this. One of them is kind of from the natural world, a bridle in the mouth of a horse. We put bits into horses' mouths so they may obey us. We direct their entire body. And so, if you've ever ridden a horse, driven a horse, ridden a horse, you start yanking on those reins, it creates pain and a signal to the horse that, hey, I'm going to go this way, so I'm going to pull on that side. And that horse will go that way. And then from the man-made world, ships, same sort of thing. Now he's talking about wind-driven ships, and certainly we have wind-driven sailboats and things like that. But I've stood next to aircraft carriers before, and things are 1,000 feet long. 1,000 feet, probably 3 or 4 times the length of this building, if not more. And you go to the back of the thing, and when you see a comparatively tiny little rudder, a small one. So there's the two examples that he comes up with. So even, it's true in his day, it's even truer in our days. They still have a very, very small rudder back there to control things. He says those are two examples to look at when you understand the power of the tongue. So, and he goes on to say, the tongue's a fire. You get burned by fire. Now, we also use fire to cook our food and warm our houses and things like that. So it's a tool that can be useful, but fire is also something that can burn a lot. Small part of the body, verse 5, boasts of great things. Behold how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And so you can, with the power of your tongue, do just everything around you. You really, really can. I mean, there are times that you've got to be shut. Here you were going to say something.
Because, once that small word comes out, try as hard as you rock to keep that in.
It's never coming back. It's never. All the apologies in the world, and it's maybe it's good to be blessed with a bad memory in some ways, because sometimes you forget those things that somebody has said to you, and so you're not scorekeeping and stuff like that. But the danger of it, and he lists these in verses 5 and 6, it defiles the entire body. Okay? It defiles the entire body. It sets on fire the course of our life. Oh, things can spool out of control. So it can lead us to hell, where it will be set on fire. Our tongue could really get us into trouble. Verse 8, he calls it a restless evil, full of deadly poison. And every one of us, I would suspect, has been in a situation sometimes where we've been subject to somebody else's tongue and the things that they've said. And sometimes in anger. The anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. Okay? But we've all been there at some point or another where somebody has said something to us that it really hurts. And what's our response got to be? Unfortunately, what is our response probably going to be to that kind of a thing? Say something we shouldn't say straight back. Okay? And so we up the ante.
Our response Moses praise him.
Yeah. A much better man than me, right? Because what is our tendency as humans? To lash back, reflect whatever maybe perfectly valid criticism at ourselves, but we try to deflect that by lashing back at somebody else, and they have the same tendency. So, fighting back. John?
Even if someone's mute, you can still do the lashing back in your head.
Yeah.
It still puts you in a bad situation. You still had a thought you shouldn't have had, and you may be condemned because of that.
Yeah.
But as soon as it comes out in a word or a hand gesture or a punch in the face, something like that, and you involve someone else, now you've got two people involved. At least it's hard not to figure
That's right.
Neither of you can read the other person's intentions very well. And then you include all kinds of stuff like non-face-to-face communication, the tone of voice is even gone. It's like, you're in a situation that's really, really, really difficult to solve.
Yeah.
So you can still immediately jump into sin without saying a word or doing anything, just thinking, oh man, I really hate that person. But as soon as you actually do something about it, what he's talking about, or saying a word or whatever that you shouldn't have, you like really escalated that to
Yeah.
near impossible to solve
Yeah.
unless both people are trying really hard.
Yeah, and it's really, really difficult. I would argue almost impossible to control that initial response in your head. That's difficult, okay? You gotta fight that though. If you dwell on that, that's where the problem really starts to happen, okay?
Temptation to have that thought.
Yep,
And
Yep.
then what are you gonna do with that temptation?
Yep.
Squash it or let it run.
yeah. And so when you dwell on it, you let it run, and maybe you let it run to the point where you've still been able to control it. It's not come out. But next time, what happens? Next time you bring up all these things you've been keeping track of, it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then people lash out. So,
That's probably why silence to offense might be the immediate option, but it's not the long-term one.
which one?
When your reaction is to say something ugly, and so you clamp down and don't,
Yeah.
that's good at first, but the problem still hasn't been addressed.
Right.
So,
And it may need to be addressed, but one option in dealing with problems is always what?
well,
Sometimes it could be do nothing.
But that is only based on the idea that you will be able to recover as you should.
Yeah.
Okay, if you cannot move on without some sort of communication, you need to do what you need to do so that it's not sitting there as a little check on the scorecard you're gonna bring up later. If you're gonna bring it up someday, bring it up when you have control.
Right. And when the other person is in the right frame of mind. Okay? You know, I can't come up with an immediate example in this particular realm, but we all face, I want to sit on this issue a little bit. We all face a lot of problems every day. Okay, if you're in a work environment, things come to you and things happen and everything else. And a very wise guy I worked for one time says, you know what? One option in problem solving is always to do nothing, because there's a whole lot of problems that just kind of work themselves out. Okay? Now, we're not talking about sin. We're just talking about, you know, problems and frustrations of daily living and work and things like that. Sometimes, okay, let it go, and maybe it needs to be dealt with. Maybe it doesn't. But maybe it doesn't need to be dealt with right this moment. Okay? Maybe we can,
Stop and think about it.
yeah. Let the problem mature a little bit so we can find out what the problem really is. Because sometimes if we don't gather all that information and problem solving that we need, what do? We solve a problem that doesn't exist, we make it worse, and the one that does exist, the one that's the root cause out there, we never get around to dealing with it all, and so it comes up again. It comes up again. That's right. That's right. And so, I mean, one of the things that you do when you first get into a job, before you start making all kinds of recommendations about how they change the thing on your first day, figure out how things work to begin with, okay? And that's, you know, you get in there, you're energetic, and you want to help out, and show them how smart you are and everything else, and what do you do? You know? You end up losing a lot of credibility right off, and so,
So it comes back to the work that I'm going to
yeah.
in his
Yeah.
trying to
Imperfect knowledge, and I've got a bullet on that a little bit later on here, because that's, you know, pretty decent insight there. So, okay, so the tongue is a fire. In 7 and 8, he says, you know, nobody can tame it. And it's kind of his second warning. You know, if you go back to chapter 1, verse 27, this pure and undefiled, is it 127? Oh, 26. If anyone thinks himself to be religious, yet does not bridle the tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. I mean, you notice he used bridle, the tongue right there, and then here in chapter 3, he's using the bridle in the horse's mouth as an example of how this worked out. So, What are the things that we do as parents to try to control this tendency to lash out and use our tongues too much? What do we do with our children to help them deal with that? What do our parents do with us? Maybe it's not done as much. If you cannot, what?
Say something nice.
Say something nice, don't say it at all. Okay? That's one of the, it's kind of a cultural literacy sort of thing. That used to be something in our society that was widely said. Is it so much anymore? You read some comments on the internet and you wouldn't think anybody did before. Okay? Because it's like nobody can say anything nice. Okay? What's another thing we tell our children, or should tell our children, when they want to lash out in anger?
Okay.
Count to 10. Count to 10. Hey, you find yourself getting angry? Count to 10. As a parent, I find myself getting angry. What do? Oh, count to 10, maybe 20, 30. Start over at 1 each time. Those are the kinds of things that we do to try to control our anger. And it's not just with children, it's really with everybody around us, because life is difficult. God puts things in our path so that we can become better people. And He never puts anything there that we can't handle. But there are things that He does put there that we choose not to handle. That's right. Yeah. Patience. And goes on for endurance. So, yeah. Is there anything else parents say to children that skip my mind about how to control their anger? Okay. When he talks about the danger of this in verses 7 and 8, every species of beasts, birds, reptiles, creatures is tamed, has been tamed, but nobody can tame the tongue. You can go way back in antiquity, like 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and find writings in secular history from men pointing out that we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, and we have to do twice as much listening as speaking. Okay, you've all heard this. And that your teeth are there as sharp instruments to guard the tongue. Okay? Another thing that parents say is, bite your tongue. And there are times where you just need to do that. So it's not a new problem, is it? It wasn't new when James was writing it 2,000 years ago. It wasn't new 1,000 years before that. It's always been out there. So, okay. You think we'd have it next by now, right? But we don't, do we? That's right. And I think this is something that every person has to deal with this. You're not alone. For some people, it's a little bit harder than for other people. We were at the congregation in Washington State. I was doing the bulletin, and asked kind of for announcements somehow, and someone said, I'd like you to put in there that I need prayers to help control my mouth or something like that. It sounded a little bit more of a, it was a little bit almost cruder than what I wanted to really put in the bulletin. It almost sounded a little bit rude. Like this person is praying that she would shut her mouth. It kind of came across that way to me a little bit. And I talked to one of the elders and said, hey, did we soften that language at all? He says, why would you? That's what she asked for. She knew what she needs. So, okay. In 9 through 12, with it, our tongue we bless our Lord and Father, we curse men who have been made in likeness from the same mouth, blessing and cursing, my brother. These things ought not to be as a fountain send forth salt and fresh water. And the fig tree. Does a fig tree produce olives or a vine figs? In terms of blessing our Lord and Father and cursing men made in God's likeness, is anybody guilty? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. Is there anybody not guilty? I think we've all been there, haven't we? We all fight with this. And it's going to happen, unfortunately, amongst brethren, okay? And so what's the charge made about people at church? Hypocrites. Hypocrites. And I think the best answer I ever heard is yes. And this is where we go to get help. Okay? This is where we go to get help because we recognize that we're hypocrites. And praying to some sort of a porcelain god is not going to do you any good. Okay? Asking something of an idol is not going to help us get through that. Asking the one who created our tongue and created our mind to help us through it. That is what is going to actually work. So that's why we're here. Matthew 7:16. Good trees bear good fruit. Good fruit. Bad fruit. So our tongues need to do the same sort of thing. There's several times I think in the day where that particular verse is going to come up. Okay. Here's something I want to look at just a little more. I think you already understand this, but if you want to destroy your credibility as an example to the people around you, let your tongue fly. I mean, it's just the best way to do it. And James is not the only one that thinks that. And that's kind of why we're going to go through some of these verses. Turn over to the book of Romans, chapter 1, 28 to 31. Just talking about immoral people. Just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, evil, envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, the gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. Although they know the ordinance of God in verse 32, those that practice such things are worthy of death. They not only do the same, but give hearty approval to those who practice them. This is really talking about the type of company that we keep if we're not careful with our tongues. And if we find ourselves falling into this kind of behavior that's talking about, we are going to gravitate toward people who participate in the same sorts of things. Okay? Because we're more comfortable with that than someone who doesn't. Okay? And their morals are going to start to not just impact us, but infect us. Okay? Those are two ways of looking at the same thing, but the idea that those things can infect us. And so we need to stay away from those sorts of things. And look at the number of things in there that talk about strife, falls the tongue, deceit, tongue, malice, tongue, gossips, tongue, slanderers, tongue, arrogant, boastful, all involve the tongue. Okay. Now, the mind is still behind that, okay? But the tongue is there to show what's there in your mind. So, in Ephesians 4, Ephesians 4:29. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed with hope. 31. Let all bitterness, wrath, and anger, and clamor, and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Almost the same list as in Romans there. Same writer, Paul, is there in both of those places, writing in both these letters, writing to different places. It's a problem in Rome, it's a problem in Ephesus, it's a problem in Colossae. Ephesians 5, verse 3. Do not let any immorality or impurity or greed even be named among you as proper among saints. There must be no filthiness or silly talk, or of course jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. 5:20. Always giving thanks for all things in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ to God, even the Father. That's what we ought to be doing with our tongues, right? Keep our tongues doing those things, they won't be doing. the bad he's going to talk about. Colossians 3:8. Pretty much say the same thing over here. Put them aside, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self with its evil practices, and have put on the new self, who is being renewed in true knowledge according to the image of the one who created it. I think that we've talked a little bit before. There's a tendency among brethren, mostly among the male brethren, to kind of make fun of one another. Kieran Murphy, some of you know, used to call this slagging. Slagging. And I think it's an Irish expression from his time in Ireland. Lee and I engage in that. Sometimes Gary and I engage in that. I think it's maybe I'm justifying it too much, but I kind of treat it as just an aid to Lee to keep him humble. You know, that kind of a thing. Ron and I disagree about the harmfulness of that. So we have to be careful that we know the person that we're talking to. And again, maybe I'm just justifying something I do, so I have to be very careful. But you have to know the person you're talking with. I never introduce myself to somebody new with that kind of greeting. One of the things I struggled with when I was teaching ROTC was trying to toughen the kids up for a tough look. Okay. The military changed a whole lot in 26 years that I was in, and a lot of the kids that were coming in as I was getting ready to retire and everything else had been raised in a very different environment. But they were, I think I understood better than what they did. And so there were times that there were certain students. Have I talked about this before? I don't want to repeat myself. There were certain students in a classroom that could really handle that kind of abuse, that I knew that they were going to get on the outside. Okay, there were some that could not. You can pick up on that fairly quickly, and I would sit some of them down in the individual counseling sessions and say, look, there are students in this classroom that need to know how to handle stress. I know that you do. From time to time, I'm going to stress you so that this person over here can understand how to react to stress. Okay? And I would do that, and they would understand. No problem, I got it. Others, I was pretty leery. Rhonda had a professor one time talked about somebody who, in a classroom was so nervous that she told the professor beforehand, whatever you do, don't call on me, it makes me too nervous. Okay? Well, you're in college. Okay? And he forgot. And he called her one time, and she fainted. I think she fainted on the spot or something like that, because just that immediate, that kind of a thing, like one of those little goats you can see that have a sleep disease, that kind of thing. Probably wasn't too hilarious to this girl, or the instructor who says this, and all of a sudden, what do I do now? She dropped over dead. She just fainted. I was probably a little bit more careful. I've been more careful in the things that I will had said in those ROTC classrooms, but the whole boot camp environment, the whole summer training for ROTC cadets and stuff like that, you're trying to stress people out because you're going to put some of these kids into a war situation. Yeah. If they can't figure out their right and their left when you yell at them, do they really need to be in a position where they're leading? The answer is no. You have to make that call sometimes. But it doesn't mean we should ever, verbally abuse somebody and dress them down and everything else. So, am I clear on that? Those of us who have been in the military, immediately recognize what's going on there. Those that haven't, maybe a little bit harder to stress. Okay. Any questions about what we figured out?
Well, it starts with a heart. That's where it starts.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the word you make it not.
It absolutely. That company, Ford.
There is something to be observed, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. But if ever there was a, what is the root of all evil, sort of verse, you know, this is pretty close to what everyone else is more familiar with, and there is something to be learned about the fact that the world hasn't latched onto this one to pull out of their path. Real.
Yeah.
Again, I really don't know what to say about it other than that, but there it is. You know, got questions about evil?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not you're misquoting it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they do misquote the
Right.
the one about money. They say that, you know, money is the root of all evil. That's not what he says. The love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. That's not every one of them. But chapter 3, verse 6.
Christ.
What's that?
This is just as Christ.
Yes.
But you don't hear people going around grabbing that one.
Yeah. And do we we teach our children all kinds of Bible verses. Do we have them memorize the tongue is a fire? That's a nice short one, isn't it? That'd be a good one for a child with the tongue is a fire. Yeah, Anastasia, my granddaughter, you know how she'd take that. It's gonna burn down. If you're visiting today, my granddaughter Anastasia, you know, we talked about different things that we enjoy, physical things, and it's all going to burn up someday. It's all going to burn up someday. It's not that important. It's all going to burn up someday. And the house, it's going to burn up someday. When's the house going to burn up? Before the house burning down. So the lessons have to be appropriate to an age. That we're trying to teach those things.
One more thing, you had mentioned the ROTC.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we have to be prepared as God's people. There are going to be people that are going to laugh at you, scoff at you,
Yeah.
you know, say all kinds of evil against you because you do that. That's you know, you name it. Homophobes, they're going to say mean things too.
You betcha.
And you can't wear your emotions right on the very end of your statement.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah, and if you are familiar with this, okay, what needs to come to your mind when that has happened? This person is just berating you and yelling at you and screaming at you. I've been there. Okay, on the receipt of that, what needs to come into my mind? Instead of lashing back, what needs to come to my mind is a soft what? Answer does what? Turns away wrath.
speaking truth in love.
Yeah. Those are the things that need to come to our mind instead of how can I get back at this person? Right? If we're never in here looking, that verse is not going to come to mind when it needs to. God would like to get it there, but he doesn't here. This is how he gets it there. So, and you know, if you really want to see somebody deflated, you know, and they're attacking you with something, admit to it. I mean, especially if it's true. You say, you're right, I'm sorry. They're like, oh, now what am I going to do? You know, they're prepared for a big fight, and you didn't punch back. Okay, let us, 13 through 18, chapter 3 of James. This is kind of in our faith produces wisdom. Okay, faith controls the tongue, faith produces wisdom. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there's disorder and every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Talks about two types of wisdom here. And the types of wisdom are known by the fruit that comes out of that wisdom. So the first one is earthly, natural, demonic. He calls it that in verse 15. Here's what it produces. Okay, the tree of earthly wisdom produces bitter jealousy, selfish, and I want to say selfish ambition, arrogance, lying, disorder, evil things. 1 Corinthians 3, maybe just a list of the same sorts of things. 1 Corinthians 3:3. For you are still fleshly, for since there's jealousy, strife among you, are you not fleshly? Are you not walking like mere men? Okay, I was making a comparison there, saying the same thing that James is saying. That wisdom will lead to these sorts of things. Stay away from that sort of wisdom. Instead, heavenly wisdom, or the wisdom, he says, from above, in verses 15 and 17, is characterized by purity, it's peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, and without hypocrisy. 1 Corinthians 2, 6 and 7. Slow turn here. Yet we do speak wisdom among those who are mature. Wisdom, however, not of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are passing away, but we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God predestined before the ages to our glory. The wisdom which none of the rulers of this age has understood. For they, if they had understood it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And so there's that other wisdom out there. And James and Paul both are trying to get us to understand that good wisdom, the true wisdom of understanding in verse 13 is proven by our good behavior. Okay. That's what shows. Our good behavior proves that we've got that wisdom of understanding back there. I mentioned Matthew 7:16, the tree is known by its fruits. In the Sermon on the Mount, you will know them by their fruits. He's talking about bad prophets and good also. Last week we talked about being the light of the world. Okay, the light of the world, not the darkness of the world. There's the contrast. Okay, when you think about all these qualities that James has gone through, okay, can you think of a Christian brother or sister that you know that just seems to embody that type of stuff? Okay. I won't point out anybody in this room. It's here though. But of somebody who is a occasional visitor, comes from a distant land, from time to time. Okay, who am I thinking of? Dale, Selma. Okay, I thought of Selma first. Maybe it's because Dale and I trade barbs back and forth when we see one another. Okay. But how do you think? I'll pick on Selma a little bit. How do you think she developed those characteristics? Practice.
Lifelong work of practice.
That's right. And knowledge and understanding what God wants. Yeah, I've got to assume she's had a lot of challenges in her life. She's living in a foreign land in a very small house in a, she raised Lee. Yeah, good example. Really good example. A lot of nods from the family. Yeah.
She's not even in Europe before.
No, that's why he's the person to aim at. So, but she did it through knowledge. It started with knowledge. Okay. Now she may have started with a predisposition or a personality type that made some of that a little bit easier. And she may not have. We don't really know. Okay? All we know is her fruit today. Okay? So, are any of us the same person we were 20 years ago? You know, the type of child that you were? Oh, of course not. I hope not. We were talking about child raising. I may have been down at Soul Camp a couple weeks ago or something like that. I told somebody, look, you know, the biggest mistake people think is that they're raising children. You're not raising children. You're raising adults. You're trying to get them to be adults. You've got to have the target in mind for where you want them to be. If you think you're just raising children, you're just feeding them, changing the diapers, and guess what you're going to get when they're 18 if you don't do anything in between? You feed them and changing diapers. At least have a 50-year break in there for your parents, you know. That kind of thing. So, But it's something that has to be developed. It has to be developed because you know, because you read in God's Word, you understand, okay? And then you have to apply that, and we call that wisdom. We call that wisdom. And that's what that's what James is trying to deal with here. Use the right wisdom to develop wisdom in yourself and reinforce that in those that are around you. You'll be a little better off. Let's see. Okay. Most of us work in the world in one way or another. Do we see that kind of wisdom around us? Not at all.
The world that rode well is the first one.
Yeah, right up there.
Satan's world.
Yep, hadn't changed a bit. The place where you work, I mean, there's probably 150 of us in the office kind of where I work, okay? I'd say it's 99 to 1, okay? Maybe 95 to 5, kind of a 5% or something like that. So, what's the danger? Influence, like we've been talking about, the influence of that. Okay? Because if I'm not careful, that other part of the world, I end up going over here when I was over here. And if I go over here, have I done these folks over here any good whatsoever? And have I done myself any good whatsoever? None. If I'm over here where I ought to be, am I doing myself any good? Yes. God said, be over here, John. Okay. Am I doing them over here any good if I'm here? Yes, I am. I may not see it. Okay. Nobody may ever come to me and say, why are you such a nice guy?
We all do.
Okay, but they may never come and see that. But the influence that I have is going to remain unseen. Okay, what do we call that? Planting what? Planting seed. Okay, our job is to plant seed. God will give the increase. Okay, and so that's one of the first things I do. Make sure that my influence on the world outweighs the world's influence on me. Okay, is that fair enough that way? Where do I find out what my influence ought to be? Well, right here with brethren and looking at the Word so that I know how I ought to behave, because the Bible holds up a mirror to me, so I can finally see what it is I should be like. Okay? If I'm not holding it up to look at it, then all I see is the world, and I don't ever figure that out. Okay? Let's see. Turn over to Romans, and then we'll be done here, I think. Romans chapter 12. Now, in spite of the fact that I may have nothing in common with my coworkers, okay, or very, very little, and some of us have nothing in common, I still need to be on friendly terms with them, okay, with my friends and my acquaintances, or people I know who work, my coworkers and my acquaintances. I need to be on friendly terms. And, I think this verse makes the point here, Romans 12:18. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Okay? All men kind of includes all men. Everybody you work with, everybody you're around, and everything else. Yeah, but do I let those people that are out there, that are in the world, that are a bad influence, do I let them into my inner circle of people who have an influence on me? Because I have to evaluate that person. Is that person a good influence on me or not? And if they're not, I need to make sure that they stay outside of that circle where people do influence me. Where should I get my influence? Right here. Okay, with examples of people who are brethren who can have that good influence on me. Because they are going to try to influence me to ungodly behavior, aren't they? Okay, they will do that. And we had read, we got right up to it in Romans chapter 1. at the very end there, verse 32, although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, and here's the thing, they give hearty approval to those who practice them. Your co-workers, if they are a bad influence, will do everything they can to get you to participate in the wrong things that they do. They will do that. Okay? Because the fact that you won't convicts them. It shows them that, hey, there is evil in the world. I'm going to do my best not to participate in it. Well, if I'm over here, that means that it is possible to stay away from that. But they don't want to. So if they can drag you from this side over to their side, what does it do for their conscience? At a superficial level, it kind of salves their conscience. Okay? At a deep level, they're still convicted. They still know what's wrong. But they go on and do it anyway. And that's what the other part of Romans chapter 1 is about. So, when we talk about influences that are around us, either from work or neighbors or whatever, we draw that line, okay? And that line is drawn by wisdom. And James is talking about wisdom. Use wisdom to really draw that line to make sure that the people who are your coworkers or acquaintances are not influencing you to bad behavior. Okay? If that's what's happening, then you need to change the relationship, okay? Or changing the relationship, ending it is one way of changing that. But you need to make sure that our influence is bigger on them than their influence is on us. It needs to be overwhelming. Okay. And if we're not able to do that, then we need to be very, very careful. But we have to draw that line for the sake of our souls, okay, and the sake of our families. Okay? We've got to understand the wisdom of keeping bad influences out of our lives. So it takes wisdom. You know? Proverbs 2, 3, and 4. You got wisdom, and that's one of the reasons I think that James is kind of called the wisdom literature of the New Testament. We talked about that earlier on. So, okay, close enough. Thank you very much. And next week, we'll do chapter 4.